I think despite the 100% record, these two questions about Samu Castillejo and Cisco Munoz must be addressed. These two Spanish in question, they have to up their own games, one on the pitch, one on the tactical ball. If not, it is going to be as puzzling for the Johor Southern Tigers to say, like, hey, why are we still relying on that local born superstar Arif Aiman? Why is nobody trying to take the load off him apart from Figueiredo, perhaps Bergson? Who else can lift that burden off Arif Aiman? It's like, even with that depth, and that is not good news. It was a comfortable 3-1 victory for Johor Darul Ta'zim over Singapore side Lion City Sailors in the Battle of the Causeway Champions Group E opener in the ASEAN Club Championship Shopee Cup at the Sultan Ibrahim Stadium earlier this evening. But despite the comfortable goal margin and keeping their 100% record in the 2025-26 campaign so far, some questions still abound over the Southern Tigers' level of competitiveness, especially when sterner tests await against tougher opponents in the AFC Champions League Elite East Zone League stage that will commence in the middle of next month. And in spite of opening their debut ASEAN Cup Championship campaign with a victory and 3 points in the bag, the manner in which the players took to this match, and in particular Southern Tigers head coach Cisco Munoz tactical confusion, especially in the second half, would have provided a glimpse of unease for the Southern Tigers fans, who would probably want their club not just to be dominant in Malaysia, but also to conquer beyond being mere Kampong Rajas, which they have been consistent in doing so for at least the last 11 years. So, with that view in mind, Tayaja attempts to review on how, despite that 3-1 victory, how certain things could undermine Johor in the later months of the campaign, and it could come at the cost with those signs showing so early into their season. And that is, as I said just moments ago, in spite of their 100% record in all competitions so far, and it's still early into the season. And in all fairness, Johor are already into their 4th game of the season, into their 3rd competition of this campaign, and they're up against Lion City Sailors side who were actually stunned by BG Tampines Rovers in the Singapore Community Shield over the weekend. And still reeling from that loss, the Sailors came to Johor across the causeway looking to find a certain rebound against an opponent that are many levels higher than them. And you can see, in spite of their best efforts, the Sailors were unfortunately found wanting, particularly in the first 45 minutes, as the Southern Tigers easily imposed themselves in the first half. And part of the reason why Johor were able to exert their influence without going to first or second gear was down to the lack of cohesiveness in the Sailors lineup. And actually, in this Sailors lineup, there were quite a number of changes as Alexander Rakovic deployed a 5-4-1 formation in an attempt to stymie the attacking prowess of the likes of Jairo and, in particular, Arif Aiman, as well as the midfield industry of Hector Havel and Nacho Mendes, and also I think their number 25 as well, and João Figueiredo. So actually, for the Southern Tigers, they actually got off to the perfect start as early as the 8th minute when they were awarded a penalty after Safar Baharudin, the former Selangor captain who is now on loan with the Lion City Sailors, he elbowed Jairo as he was through on goal to to concede the resulting spot kick, which Figueiredo, the Malaysian naturalized striker, had no problems converting from the spot. So it was 1-0 within the first 10 minutes. And as the minutes went by the first half, you can see that the Sailors were still reeling from that shock 1-4 defeat at Jurong East Stadium on Saturday to Tampines Rovers, and that lack of cohesiveness, particularly in defence. Someone showing why he was exactly let go by Kazuhito Kinushi with that clumsy challenge early in the game, and also not exactly building up a solid three-man centre-back partnership with Lionel Tan and Sailors captain of the evening, Tony Dakovic. To compound matters worse, and actually to make things a lot easier for Johor, Sailors' new goalkeeper, Ivan Susic, who is 2 meter tall, had a horrendous first 45 minutes. I mean, when the opponents have a goalkeeper who is such a calamity at the back, who wouldn't want to take the opportunity to pounce? And it didn't take long also, once again, for the lack of cohesiveness between the various departments in the Sailors 11 on the pitch to show once again when a poor clearance from the Sailors defense within their own third allowed Figueiredo to score his second of the evening, and by just over the quarter of an hour, it's already game, set and match for the Malaysian champions. And all they had to do is just to control the tempo, to dictate the tempo of the game, which they duly did without putting in too much pressure on themselves. You could say that in a way the disparity between the Malaysian champions and the Singapore champions are several miles apart, and that is in spite of the Sailors' rather stellar record last season when they swept everything locally and reached the ACL2 final. And it's in a way indicative on how the difference between a team that is still in the top level of Asian club competition, in this case Johor, where they're still competing at this level, and you got the Sailors who are still competing in the second tier ACL2, where they are grouped this time with Johor's rivals Selangor in the same group, Group G, in all ASEAN affair in the first phase. So all said and all done, perhaps going ahead so early, Johor probably decided to close shop. And there is a way to close shop without putting too much pressure on themselves and keeping the opponents at bay. And this is where perhaps, while the talent of the Southern Tigers, especially the players on the pitch, were not in doubt, questions persist over one player in particular on the pitch. Their captain of the evening was Samuel Castillejo, who was brought in the middle of last season with a reputation of playing for La Liga club Valencia and Serie A side AC Milan, and having competed in European club competitions. But I think as the months have now gone on, one will have to realize that is Samu really up for the hustle and bustle? Yes, Sailors were not as strong compared to them in this battle of the Causeway champions, but questions have to be asked whether Samu is really a luxury player on the pitch, and with as stacked the talent as Johor have in their first team squad, that they're still relying a lot on a local born player, their local born superstar Arif Aiman, to do the bulk of their attacking work, the bulk of their creative force, where you probably would have expected Samu to do some work on the other flank or in attacking midfield, given his technical ability, given his composure, as people who have seen in his highlight reels before he joined. But perhaps for Samu Castillejo, I think the question marks that might have abounded over his ability to sustain himself over a few seasons, where question had abounded previously in Valencia and also in AC Milan, are perhaps resurfacing at the Sultan Ibrahim Stadium. It is not nice for me to say this so early into the season, and perhaps critics might say, hey, why is Tiger attacking a player so early on, even though Johor on a perfect run, which is true, they are still on 100% record, and Cisco Munoz, their head coach, is still having a good honeymoon start, but questions already abound. And this is where I'll touch on Cisco Munoz a bit later on. So, where this is concerned, and this is in spite of what Johor actually fielded as what is most likely their AFC Champions League elite starting 11, probably their strongest 11 possible. In what they played as a 4-2-3-1 formation, although I do expect a little adjustments when they come up against the Chinese clubs, the Japanese clubs, Melbourne City of Australia, Buriram United of Thailand in the league stage, when the highest level of Asian club competition kicks off in earnest in mid-September. But still, is Samu really an answer to building on Johor's prowess, or is it a question of him being a bit of a luxury, where perhaps more hardworking imports who are left on the bench this season, like Bergson or perhaps even Herbert D, they could have made a better difference? Yes, it's a serious question, because at times it appeared that Samu really stayed on the floor for much longer than we expected after the Sailors put in a few robust challenges on him, and they were not hard tackles or flying tackles trying to hurt him and all that the way the Europeans might have, but perhaps in more traditional kampong style or localized style of imposing themselves on the pitch. Samu already has been found a bit wanting on the physical side. Even in the Piala Subansing opener on the 8th of August, Castillejo has that unique problem already, like where he had to be substituted out after the first half. So perhaps the Johor coaching staff will have to really ask a serious question. Is Samu Castillejo a player that is worth putting in from the start where the challenges will come flying, or would he be better suited to make a difference as an impact substitute? Or is Samu himself willing to raise the stakes, willing to raise the game that make him at one point a precautious prospect when he first started out his career in Spain? I think this is a serious question for Johor to really think about, even though it's so early into the season, because it's not what happens at the start that will lead towards the end. But I think when the signs are there at the start that are not so favorable, questions have to be asked early. Although it seems rather like they'll say, why is this guy asking this question? Why is he asking this question so early? But what happens on the pitch does not lie. And when your new signings like Nacho Mendes, John Irazabal, João Figueiredo have already proven their worth from the get-go, when they were handed their chances in the starting 11, they showed what they could do. They showed their work rate, they showed their commitment. Obviously, they have the technical ability to get past many of the opponents domestically, but even in Southeast Asia, they will have that ability and commitment to go past. But for some, that's where the question mark goes, and that is in spite of him wearing the armband. For now, it really does appear that the ability of the Johor players are bringing the team through. It doesn't matter in Malaysia which lineup they feel they're most likely usually able to win, but is whether those players who are brought on, who are trusted to start, being able to do the job. And to compound matters, Cisco Munoz, the head coach, he was once the Newcastle striker, but later made his name as a head coach, although rather infamously for Leeds, where after failing to win the first 8, 9, 10 games in the second tier of English League competition, the English Championship, Cisco was dismissed. The funny part is, Johor are winning right now, and the scores do reflect that level of superiority. And by usual accounts, you wouldn't be asking questions about the coach at this early stage. But Johor is not an ordinary club. Johor is, by Southeast Asian standards, a super club. And when you are a super club, you do expect certain high levels of standards. whether even when you play against domestic opponents, maybe you won't expect the players to give more than 100%, but you expect the players to understand what you want to do on the pitch, to do it effectively, to do it efficiently, to execute it with minimal fuss, and with players understanding where they are supposed to be contributing in every area of the pitch. But on certain cases today, especially in that substitution model in the middle of the second half, questions are raised on whether Xisco Munoz is really the right guy, because he was preparing to bring on Arif Faisal, but it was for who? Initially, it was the board showed it was for Samu Castillejo, but later, as at the same time, Arif Aiman went down injured temporarily and had to be stretchered off, so he was initially preparing for Arif. But yet again, that flip-flop happened when eventually by the 70th minute, 5 minutes after the whole botched substitution plan for Johor, that Xisco eventually threw on Arif Faisal for Samu Castillejo. I mean, it's a straightforward win. It's a straightforward game for Johor. It's a straightforward result. And the last thing you need is for the head coach to be so confused in what is relatively a straightforward, easy game. But Xisco Munoz made such a hash of that substitution during those 5 minutes that you wonder whether, when the critical moments come, especially in the ACLE games and in certain ASEAN Club Championship games against Bangkok United and Nandin in Group B, could he be trusted upon to execute those substitutions when Johor needs something to change the game, to change the tempo, to swing things when they are falling behind? And usually players, however senior, however high the level, they will usually try to look at the main man on the bench, the main man in charge, for inspiration, for guidance, for any technical solutions that he can find. But instead, Xisco found none. In a way, I know it's rather insulting to say, why did he not bring on Bergson earlier, so that perhaps Figueiredo or even Jairo, who was rather quiet on the pitch, he had a few missed chances, but yes, Jairo was rather quiet, when Bergson could have done more than those 10 minutes or so that he was given. I think this is where only Xisco could answer. When you know that the Sailors were not going to cause much of a threat, even though the Sailors, the Singaporean champions, to their credit, upped their game in the second half, you have to ask whether Xisco knew what he was doing. Would he be ready to throw on Bergson for half an hour, where Bergson, with his high work rate and productivity, he could have notched at least one goal or two, or perhaps build up a partnership with Figueiredo, or time for Xisco to make a few experimentations to build on the Malaysia FA Cup campaign, where they were comfortable winners in the first leg on the first round. But yet, this was again found wanting. And you're talking about a straight, no, again, it's a straightforward win. It's a 100% record. But there are signs that there are questions over whether Xisco Munoz is indeed the right coach for Johor Darul Taksin this early on, where expectations are high and where the main goal for Johor is built towards getting to at least the quarterfinals of the ACLE this season, in spite of a tough league group draw, because this time round there are Japanese clubs and there are no slouches unless they choose not to perform rather. Then every game becomes a life and death encounter for Johor. And with such hesitation and reluctance in throwing in more fresh faces on the pitch in that straightforward win, and perhaps I think you can see how much Johor actually held back in the second half and allowed Sailors to push themselves, notably Bak Ramsala, who was able to cause a few problems with a couple of shots, and also Anderson Lopez, when given that rare chance, that rare good service, where he was able to jump above the two Johor centre backs, Irazabal and Irasawa and let me see, they're number 5. Yeah. That question mark remains over how Johor are prepared to deal with tougher encounters again. It's a lost opportunity for Johor to test certain things still. If Cisco had thrown in a few subs and they did not exactly work out with perhaps conceding 2 goals in a closer 3-2 loss, perhaps you can see that Cisco is still trying to look at a few things ahead. But unfortunately, in front of a less than half full Sultan Ibrahim Stadium, Cisco Munoz showed none of that. The Johor players had already held back. And to Sailors' credit, they eventually did manage to get 1 goal through their substitute Shawar Anwar. But that is only after Arif Aiman sealed the game a few minutes from time with a smartly taken quick free kick. The players are still able to do the job for Johor, minus Sabu Castillejo. But can Cisco be trusted to lead the team? Or as early on, I know it sounds like, hey, why is this guy trying to say that there's a panic button to press for Johor? But his inability to effect effective substitutions against a much inferior opponent, even though the guys in white, the Singaporean champions, had improved in the second half, when even Susic was no longer a liability, when the first 45 minutes was very forgettable. It says a lot about how much the level Cisco really has. And it's not the toughest game in this whole 25-26 campaign. But I think Johor Southern Tigers should really start asking serious questions about Cisco Munoz. And it's a test for Cisco Munoz to show what he can really do before the recriminations come in because of yet another valent Johor failure, and perhaps, I don't like to say, league stage failure in the AFC Champions League elite. And I think despite the 100% record, these 2 questions about Sabu Castillejo and Cisco Munoz must be addressed. These two Spanish in question, they have to up their own games, one on the pitch, one on the tactical board. If not, it is going to be as puzzling for the Johor Southern Tigers to say, like, hey, why are we still relying on that local born superstar Arif Aiman? Why is nobody trying to take the load off him apart from Figueiredo, perhaps Bergson? Who else can lift that burden off Arif Aiman? It's like, even with that depth. And that is not good news. So, although it's Tanya for Johor Darul Takzim for their comfortable 3-1 win over Lion City Sailors, it's not entirely pleasing reading despite the win, despite the 3 points. And I do hope Cisco Munoz will eventually be able to show what he can do, and for Sabu Castillejo to show that he can bring the extra spark that he was precisely brought in to do in the middle of last season. Otherwise, we could see a campaign where Johor would still be dominant domestically, but beyond the domestic competitions, they're going to be in patches in terms of their form. They're going to be a bit erratic, and they could be exposed more than the Johor fans would like to admit at the highest level of Asian club competition. Even with the Shanghai clubs again and all that would not be good reading at all. And that is the rather somber note I'm putting in spite of a 4th successive victory for Johor in all competitions.